I think that that's what people miss out on, is that they think that the imposter syndrome is such a negative thing. And again, I deal with it. I mean, I've got
Sure.
playbooks on how to deal with imposter syndrome all the time, but everyone wants to get rid of it. And I'm like, do you realize how powerful it is and how it drives like just this insatiable desire to always get better? That helped me out so much.
Welcome to the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I'm your host, Seema Alexander, a business growth strategist and advisor and creator of the Unique Method. In each episode, I have unfiltered conversations with successful founders, CEOs, and experts where we delve into their business journeys of how they went from chaos to growth and everything in between. If you're an entrepreneur seeking inspiration, tips, and strategies to take your business to the next level and turn your spaghetti into growth, this is the podcast for you. Now let's start growing. Todd Herman has been working with the highest achievers in sports and business for over 2 decades. He's the creator of the multi-award-winning leadership and skills development program, 90-Day Year, and the author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, The Alter Ego Effect, The Power of Secret Identities to Transform Your Life. He creates programs that get delivered to over 200,000 professionals in 73 countries on an annual basis. And I am so excited to share my interview with Todd to go so deep in his spaghetti journey with you today. Let's get going. All right. Welcome to our next episode of From the Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I am so excited to have our next guest on, Todd Herman. We were just chatting right before where we originally met. And this was probably several years ago in New York, part of the Savor the Success, Angela Gia Kim's, one of her amazing events. But at the same time, Todd, I've known about you and your incredible work with Peak Performance, the 90-Day Year, obviously your book with the Alter Ego Effect. We're going to get a lot into that in this podcast for years. And I just want to share with you that you've always been a friend and a mentor in my head, even though we haven't really communicated a ton. But your influence and your way of sharing amazing strategies for so many entrepreneurs and elite peak performers around the world has influenced me and in what I do every day. So I just wanted to start this podcast with giving you roses.
Oh,
Needed
well,
to do that.
I appreciate that. So, but we'll dig into maybe the behind the scenes, which I know you always go to, which I appreciate, of the hard won scars that maybe allowed me to share some strategies for people. So,
Absolutely. So let's just get into that. The first question I normally ask people here is, what was the driving force behind your decision to start a business?
I am not a true kind of entrepreneur that sought out originally to just build businesses. I'm very much an accidental entrepreneur. And sorry to everyone, this is not a audition for 1-900 number service today with my raspy voice, but it is a direct result of the fact that over the weekend I was coaching my young daughter's sports teams and we had a lot of games. And so a lot of coaching was going on. So I lost my voice a little bit, but totally an accidental entrepreneur. I grew up as a farm and ranch kid. Like entrepreneurialism is sort of built straight into that lifestyle, but we wouldn't call it that. It's just sort of self-autonomy, take care of yourself. Like the best part about growing up on that ranch was you learn about kind of the cycle of life as well. And you learn about the values of hard work. And my dad was just such an incredible original mentor in the way that he always carried himself and was so well respected in our communities and then in the province that I originally grew up in Alberta, Canada. But I say accidental entrepreneur because I was really good at what became my business when I was an athlete, which is the mental game. I'm not physically gifted. I wasn't 6'4" and 245 pounds of solid muscle, but I played college football. I had a bunch of scholarships. I was a nationally ranked badminton player, played lots of different sports. But I got my mental toughness maybe from being the younger brother to 2 older brothers who could always beat me up physically. So I had to be a little bit tough. And when I got done playing college football and I was volunteering at a high school, some kids on the team were just struggling with not being able to perform in the game like they could in practice, which is pretty common. And so I spent a lot of time just helping them with that inner game, like routines and just really basic stuff, the stuff that I did. And they started getting great results. I happened to be researching and reading up on the mind and kinesiology and even neuroscience way back. And this is the mid 90s. And I just started teaching the kids like how their brain worked. And so some parents started asking me if I could mentor their sons and daughters. And that's how the Peak Athlete started, was me saying, yeah, sure. And then them going, okay, well, how much do you want to charge us? And me going, oh, how about $75 for a package of 3 sessions? And that was my price point for 3 years. So
And you were in college then, or is this high school?
I was 21 at the time. So I was at college age, but I got kicked out of college because I wasn't going. And because I was starting this other sort of like software startup at the time. And yeah, so I was about 21.
You were about 21. So actually, let's go a little further. So you have other entrepreneurial endeavors before you got into this space, right? And I think that's really important to share.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurship happens in multiple ways. People are in corporate and then they decide. People like a Gary Vee started doing baseball cards as a kid and figured it out in that different way. So what did that like? You talked about the farming life, and I think
Yeah.
that's really important to add there, because there's a level of discipline and consistency that is unparalleled. So like building that ecosystem. But where did you get in those first initial like, oh my God, I don't know, what was it for you before the peak performance?
I would say my first experience in the love of making money, like actually making money, was 4-H. So 4-H is like agricultural Boy Scouts, very popular in rural communities. And my particular brand of 4-H, you have these clubs, and mine was the beef club. And so what you did, you raise a small calf to basically a teenager age. So it's now the size of a steer. And then you have to learn to lead it around on a halter and stand properly in a ring and stuff. And there's this whole process around it. And that takes about 6 months. And while you're in the club, there's also a big speaking competition. And it's well known, like around North America. And you always competed with your local club. Then you went to divisionals and then regionals and, nationals. And I was 10 years old and I won my club at the age of 10. And then I won my divisional one, and I went to regionals and I won as well. So I got first place and I was beating 16-year-olds and stuff like that. So I had a knack for speaking, but when I sold that calf at the end of the year, and I made around $1,200, which is this is 86, sorry. And I was like, $1,200. And I was able to go and buy a Nintendo with some of that money. And so I was like, oh, like that was such a big amount of money to me. And I made that, like, because of the work that I did, I made some money. And then about a year and a half later, there was a bunch of work that was happening on some of the roads in my community. And my brother and I got the contract to pick up all the rocks in the ditches. Like, it was like really hard labor stuff, but it was 2 months. And my brother and I made about $10,000. We had to rebuild fence posts and all this kind of stuff. I'm literally talking very much farm talk to everyone here, but it's probably very foreign to many. But that was a ton of money to me. And I was like, wait a second. And that was only in 2 months' time, and I made $10,000. But I was starting to close the loop really, really quickly on the fact that if you put in your own work and you can control your own, because we had to control, it was our schedule. No one woke us up. Mom and dad didn't wake us up. We got the contract, and we were out there at 6 o'clock in the morning, because where I grew up, it was extraordinarily hot. And so we would work very early, leave in the kind of lunchtime heat, and then we'd come back and finish up throughout the day. But that was, to your exact point where you were making, is there's these little breadcrumbs that started somewhere that helped along the process. So that was a big part of me understanding that for as many uncontrollables as there are in the world, I was lucky enough at a young age to experience my own internal controllables around my hard work. And we went out and we submitted a contract, even though we were like, I was 12, my brother was 14, 15 at the time. And we got this little contract. So that was important. And then I would say the original thing that got me into the value of creating something from nothing was, and I tell the story on stage, my cousin Greg, him and I were inseparable as young kids. And he lived on an acreage outside of the city that was close to our family's farm, Medicine Hat, Alberta. And he had a train track that was right behind his house. And so one day we were about 7, we took his little radio flyer red wagon. And this isn't a cliche. It was a legit radio flyer red
Radio
wagon.
flyer. Okay.
Yeah. And we walked along the railway tracks because when we were out there exploring one day, we found this rock that had a bunch of gold on it. And so we took this, we were like, we're going to make so much money. Like people have no idea how rich we're going to be. And so we walked down this train track and we picked up all the rocks that had gold on them. Now it was fool's gold, of course. And so we had this huge heaping load of rocks and gold. And we went out to the road that went kind of close to his house, about a kilometer away. So we walked out there and we had a cardboard sign that said, big gold, $25, little gold, $10. And we stood there and we just sort of held it up to people as they were driving by. And it's not a very busy road. And
Sure.
this old couple stopped their car and got out. And credit to the old man, because I mean, he toppled a bunch of dominoes for me. And he picked up the rocks and he's like, oh, this is a lot of gold. And he's like, $25, that's pretty steep. And he's like, you know what? I think I'll make some money back on this. And he gave us $25 for a big rock with fool's gold on it. And then they
Oh
drove
my
away
God.
with the thing. And we were like blown away that we
My-
made $25. And we took that
By
money.
picking up a rock.
Yeah. And he lived about 4 kilometers away or three miles away from a Red Rooster convenience store, which is like a 7-Eleven. And we went there and we blew our $25 on candy and slushes and things like that. But I'll never forget that because we went and found something that we thought was valuable. And then we went and just simply showed it to other people to see if they found it valuable, which when you really look at what business is, you know, Seth Godin has a great quote that he shares in his speeches, and him and I have done a lot of keynotes together and stuff. And he says, really the act of selling and marketing is, here, I've made this. Do you want it? That's really what it is. And I mean, we're going to add more artfulness and communication around it, but I got some great lessons early on just with my own sort of ignorance, I'd say.
You're actually making me feel bad because we were in Puerto Rico this past weekend and we went to one of their, in the rainforest, right? There was fool's gold all in the water. And the person who was taking us told our kids, it's not real. I mean, it's whatever. It's not worth a lot of carrots. And my younger one, who I have a 9-year-old and 13-year-old, my 9-year-old was like taking literally. And she was like, I'm going to take this, mommy. I'm going to sell it. And I was like, Raina, that's not worth anything. And I should have been like, you know what? You don't know what in the mind of the beholder.
Yeah.
If a 9-year-old was selling specks of gold, she could have made a ton of money.
Yeah.
For the fun. But that's a great story to tell, right? Because you guys found something and like those moments when someone said, you know what, I'll buy that from you. That is a lesson. That is a lesson. And now it's going to take you in and continue to keep going. So now let's fast forward. So now you're 21 again, right? And you've gone through these moments where coaching became a thing for you, where you appreciated it. You saw the results from the people that you were coaching.
Yeah.
And someone asked you to like how much you charge. Was that like mind blowing? Was that like
I was shocked in the moment because I loved sport. That's all I did growing up. That was such a big part of my identity. And now I wasn't competing at a high level anymore, but now I was. My brother, when we both finished playing college football, we were literally on the sidelines after his last game. And he said, we just kind of embraced, and he said, now it's our job to go out and inspire other young kids to pursue their sports dreams. My brother was always very much a way more natural leader than I was. I always had to really work at it. He had it just built into him. And so he went and moved back to our family's ranch and he took it over and he's now expanded it. And I stuck around in the city that I was in, which was Edmonton, Alberta at the time. And I started volunteering at the Bev Facey High School in Sherwood Park, Alberta.
Okay.
And so when someone asked me, like, I was just going to say, yeah, I'm happy to mentor your kids. And then they're like, well, how much do you want to charge us? And then I was like, oh, $75 for 3 sessions. And when I did my quick in taxes for the next 2.5 years, because I did it all on quick in tax, I made an average of $8.56 an hour. That's what my hourly rate was, because my biggest cost was driving around to all these young kids, because they were all teenagers. That was my kind of clientele. They were all 13, 14, 15, and I would go to their homes after school or before school. So my hours were actually super early in the morning or late in the evening, which then gave me a chance to actually hold on to a paying job while I built this business, which I think the whole romantic idea of Cortez burning his ships, so many people tell in the entrepreneurial world,
Mhm.
It's actually not as common as everyone thinks that it is. That's the exception, not the rule. And I think a lot of people would have a better entrepreneurial experience if they did have income coming in from someplace else, because they could be more patient with their product. They could be less desperate. And really, because I have coached and mentored just hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs, and because I'm a mental game guy, and
Mhm.
so a lot of people come to me for that sort of navigating the inner game of being an entrepreneur as well, beyond the whole strategy of it as well, is people really struggle with that difficult early phase and stage. And because it is like entrepreneurship, this is not talked about. See, I don't know how much, I don't know if you talk about this very much, Seema, but luck is such a huge part of success. It is such a huge part of success. And I've stood on stages and told people this, and I'm happy to throw rocks at those who say it's nothing but persistence, and it's nothing but grit, and it's nothing but, your own internal confidence. And I think any entrepreneur can get a business to about $3 million a year.
Mhm.
And as long as you're constantly iterating, because you never get it right typically right off the bat, but getting it beyond 3 million, there's a lot of factors into it that have way more to do than just running the right performance system or operating system or marketing system. There's just so many factors.
So many factors. I mean, the side hustle conversation is really important. I want to dig a little deeper in that if you don't mind, Todd,
Yeah.
because the first couple years in business, a lot you mentioned it, you were an accidental entrepreneur. Many
Yeah.
people come into entrepreneurship for different reasons, different purposes. Freedom is always top of mind for people. I'm a big impact and profit and freedom. It really depends on those things. But having stability while you're growing, having stability to invest in yourself while you're growing and nurture your product and actually validate. Can you, obviously, you've mentored so many entrepreneurs. What are you seeing in the trends of that? Because right now I'm focused more, I work with a lot of people sort of on that growth stage, right? So they've been in business 3, 4 years,
Yeah.
could be at different inflection points. But those early stages are really important. There are a lot of people listening in who are at that early stage. So what other piece of advice can you give for them then, where it doesn't feel like it's an ego issue? Right? Oh, I have to have another job while I'm doing this.
Well, I mean, just the idea that you have to have another job. A lot of people have a narrative around that's being unsuccessful. That's just so categorically not true. That's just a part of the process. And in many ways, it's a far healthier approach to the process. But to your question, what are some of those other challenges that people have in those early stages? Well, one is a lot of people package up their product and they think it's done and they put the bow on it. And when they're getting feedback loops where people aren't either taking them up on their offer or their product or their service, they turn it into people are rejecting me,
Mm.
and they really should be not placing their esteem in the product that's out there. It's, hey, here's my first iteration of it. I'm going to take it out there. I believe in it. But now let's see how the market interacts with it. And they go, instead, they should have an attitude of curiosity. Geez, I wonder, I created this thing in my mad scientist lab. I have these assumptions. Now let's go see. Oh, geez, that potion didn't work. Huh, what else should I tinker on? So my point about that is just iterate. And we use really stupid terms as well. Oh, this is my baby. It's not. I'm a father to 3 kids. I would never, ever, ever compare my children to my business. I think that's just extraordinarily rude to my kids. Like if they thought that I looked at my business the same way that I looked at them, I wouldn't begrudge them if they walked up and smacked me across the face either. So we use all these really bad language terms that trap many people. And again, that's a part of my world because language is the way that human beings create their world. And entrepreneurship just has a lot of really bad patterns inside of it. So I think one is stay really curious early on. And then secondly is so many people look at the way that Seema builds her business. She's got this podcast and they're looking at your current state, but they didn't look at what you did early on to get traction, right?
For sure. Mhm.
And then even if they did go and look at what you did early on, because they heard you tell your narrative story of where you came from, and they go, okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Well, there's a reason why you might have gotten traction because of your early marketing efforts. Me, for example, the only thing that I knew how to do was speak on stages. You put me on a stage, I'm as comfortable there as I am watching Modern Family on my sofa. It is like home to me. But why? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of me speaking from the age of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I knew how to build a speech out, all that kind of stuff. And so that was my only marketing that I really did early on. Now, again, we're going back to late 90s. And so it was where I was comfortable. It was where I was powerful and strong. I didn't have to learn the skill, which that's my point is so many people choose marketing channels for themselves that cause them to put them into a stage of learning just that thing, as opposed to ask yourself the question, kiddo, be curious about where your product is. Going back to point number one. Point number two is, what do you already have as skill sets and assets that you can grow off of and get the business rolling? I think that creates a lot of delay in some people getting traction because they're looking at what someone else is doing and saying, I got to do it the exact same way. And it's a trap for many people.
So there's a lot I want to unpack in what you said, but I want to also bring it back to you. So that first thing around curiosity and iteration, how did you do that, Todd? How did you do that with your product? Again, we've kind of stuck to the 21-year-old initial coaching side. Let's go a little further. And then I have a follow up with another statement that you made.
So how did I stay curious? Well, one, I did not think this was a business. I thought people were giving me money because they liked Todd and they thought that I was just a really good babysitter for their kids after school sometimes. I didn't think that it was a real thing. Because again, coaching wasn't an industry in 1997 when this started, because it was September of 1997 when I started this. And so originally I didn't really even know if this was even a business, to be honest, because I thought that people were sort of just hiring me because they liked Todd and I was going to be a good babysitter who was going to teach their kids something, maybe after school or something like that. But I was getting these kids really good results. And I didn't think that this was going to be a long-term thing at all. But I was winning despite the fact that I wasn't highly competent or skilled in the inner game, like knowing all the things that I needed to know. But what allowed me to get better results than a bunch of other sports psychology people out there is because I had extraordinarily good rapport with my clients. They knew that I cared about them. And the one thing that I learned early on with young teenagers, and again, I was only like 8, 9 years older than some of them 7 years older than them, was I treated them like they were smart. That was one of the first things that I learned with young kids, was there's so many people around them that talk down to them. And here I am, I'm actually explaining kind of how the brain works and how that then impacts the way that they're seeing the world, like with the reticular activating system and these different things. And it just worked so well. So here I am, I'm getting results and I'm really enjoying it. And I start to question, I'm like, well, this other startup that I was going to do, I don't think that's even right for me. I think I might have just accidentally stumbled into this, but I don't think this is a real business because coaching wasn't a thing in 1997. Mental game stuff was sort of a little bit woo-woo and voodoo to many people. And so I decided that I was going to do a 90-day sprint where I was going to do nothing but validate this idea. Going back to the idea of curiosity, and is this an actual thing that I can replicate? So I resolved that I was going to do as many speeches as I could around my province of Alberta, where I lived at the time, in the next 90 days. And I decided to price anchor my speech at $2,200, $2,250. And I reached out to 2 people that I knew could hire me, and Eric and Gerald.
Okay.
And
they both were athletes.
No, they were both leaders of sports teams or associations because I wanted to come in and talk to athletes. I reached out to Eric and I said, hey, Eric, I've got this talk that I'm giving right now on the triune athlete, the mentally, emotionally, and physically tough athlete, that when you align all 3 of those things together, it produces peak performance for them. And it also creates great leaders off the ice. I was kind of going after hockey people. So he was a hockey guy. He worked with NHL guys. And he's great. Would you come out? And I said, listen, I normally charge $2,250 for this, which was like me throwing up in my mouth when I said those words. No way. I thought I was even close to worth that. But I said, I'll do it for free. Only if, though, you can get one of the parents to each of the kids. One parent from each kid has to be in the room. And he's like, oh, that's easy. Because I didn't realize how bad of a business I had, but the people who are receiving the service are not the same as the people who are paying for it, right? Sure. Kid gets service, parent pays for it. Mm-hmm. So I needed the parents in the room because I also knew that getting the kids to go home to you saying, hey mom, I just heard this guy talk about the mind and how if you have a triple brain, or wait, no, that's not it. But anyway, like they can't carry my message for me.
Of course not. Yeah.
So that was my model. And I'm like, listen, I'll do it for free if you get, and he's great. So, and then I called Gerald up too and did the same thing. And this was to a soccer association. So I did it for them. And then what I did was at the end of the talk, I'd say, by the way, to all you parents that are in the room, I'm doing this workshop. It was a 90-minute workshop for free until June 12th. And normally I price it at $2,000+. But if any of you've got kids that weren't here and you'd like me to come and speak to their sports team, I'm happy to do it. Just come up and share your information and let's set it up. But it has to happen before June 12th. And so I ended up doing 68 speeches in 90 days around my province. And
Hold on. I mean, I just need you to pause there because this deserves this.
well done.
So let me just say, I mean, but I want to stop there for another reason, right? This is organic marketing at its best. And
Yeah.
it allowed you to like practice and not that you needed it. I don't know at that,
No, I did.
that moment, right?
Yeah.
But people ask about traction and, oh, I need to get paid right away and this and that. But what you just did was such a smart marketing move. And it was a way to build reputation.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so,
And I mean,
yeah.
in
What did
the
that
end,
do for you?
well, I'll get to that one in a second. But the thing that I realized, and one of the things I tell people, and you know this, Seema, because I know you speak as well, out of all of the marketing mediums that you could ever do, I still say that nothing is more powerful than speaking. Nothing. Because I have seen people who are podcasters, I've seen YouTubers, I've seen writers and authors go on stages and be terrible speakers. But I have never seen a speaker be bad on podcast or audio, bad on video, or bad in the written form. And so it's one of the things that I talk to people, there's certain meta skills that if you develop them, they actually create a bunch of other skills. And I'm always on the hunt for what's the real one that if I develop that one will help. So, well, now what happened was I had a massive waiting list of people. And in my province of Alberta, I owned the market. Everyone either knew who I was or they were one person away in the stands from knowing who I was. Because there's a few smart things that I had done. And I give credit to this book, Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got by Jay Abraham, which came out in like the mid 90s. And because I knew nothing about marketing, I was not a good marketer. I actually still think that I'm average at marketing, but I just don't stop. So that's kind of helps. But I would say to people on stage, and the frame that he gave was most people are terrible at getting referrals because they do not anchor in people's minds very well. What is a referable moment? And I never forget that. I talk to people about referable moments all the time. And a referable moment is, I'd say to people, by the way, parents that are here, I truly believe that there's no better vehicle to develop young leaders and more confident human beings than sport. And it's the thing that I get to do every single day. And so it pains me to know that there's kids that are out there on the ice right now, and they might be dealing with just a bad coach. There's a lot of bad coaches that are out there. And some kids are dealing with maybe parents that are adding too much pressure onto them. And it's showing up on the ice or the soccer field or in the swimming pool. And you'll notice it when you're sitting in the stands because you'll hear two parents talking and they'll say, oh, man, little Timmy's just not playing like he normally can, but it's because his coach has him on this different line, or he's got this new coach this year and he's really hard on him, or he doesn't like this coach. And so in that moment, that parent is thinking about that kid's confidence. Just so you know, from my perspective in dealing with these athletes, it's typically 10x worse for that young kid because they typically do suffer a bit in silence. And so just tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, there's this guy I heard talk. You should reach out to him because that's really what he does is he helps develop stronger confidence in young athletes so they can continue to play the sport that they love and not feel so tormented by it. And so that was a referable moment. And then when I learned about Jim Collins and the flywheel, I look back to that very first marketing activity that I did, and I had just this amazing flywheel that I had accidentally developed for myself. The way that I said, free speech, parent in the room. Parents, 30% of the parents would always come up and say, hey, can you come and talk to my other son or daughter's sports team? I talked to volleyball kids. I talked to swimming kids. And then of that 30% of people that came up, some of them would say, and can you work with my son or daughter? So
So, I mean, there's some, again, you always give me things to unpack here. One, clearly books played a big impact in sort of your strategic thought process and growing a business up front. Did you have mentors or other people, or was it really just from the knowledge you were getting organically through these resources?
Yeah, I am probably the biggest flag waving carrier of mentorship on the planet. I think that it's the most lost, greased slide to success that you could ever find. Apprenticeship was always huge. I mean, you think about the most ubiquitous and prevalent isn't the word I'm looking for, but the Renaissance in and around Venice, like where you had Raphael and Michelangelo and Da Vinci and Donatello and all these, and like apprenticeship was such a big thing. And I got lucky. I went to with my uncle he won a award in Canada for construction person of the year. And so I was very close to my uncle. He's my dad, or my mom's dad, or my mom's brother, sorry. And so he invited me to come with him. And so I sat at the head table with him, and sitting next to me was this guy who just kept on peppering me with questions and peppering me with questions. He was an older guy, and I tried to ask him, but then he would just turn the conversation back around on me. And he was just asking me things that no one was asking me before. Like, hey, because I said I just won this award. And he's like, well, what are you planning on doing to give back to other people now? And I'm like, 21 or 22 at the time. I'm like, what am I going to do to give back to other people? And so he's kind of breaking down little paradigms for me. And then the host of the event said, and now we'd like to welcome to the stage Jim Rohn. And Jim was the
Wow.
man sitting next to me. And if anyone knows who he is, he's one of the
Oh,
greatest.
yes.
Forbes ranked him as the top 3 most important business philosophers of the 20th century. He's one of the greatest speakers that's ever lived. And he's got such a unique style. And so he went up and spoke for 55 minutes. And I was like, my ears have never heard this. And he sat down next to me, and I apologized to him. And so then he just gave me a few things to go and do. He challenged me to go and do a couple of things. And he said, call me when you're done. And I called him on Monday afternoon. This was a Saturday. I called him on Monday afternoon, and I said, hey, Jim, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the guy who sat next to you for 6 hours. Of course he remembered. It just only happened 2 days ago. But I did the things. Now what? And the 3 things he gave me to do, which is actually, if you're ever in a mentoring role, I always encourage people. And I have actually this definitive guide on mentorship on my website at toddherman.me, where people can go and download it. And I tell people all the time, one of the keys to mentoring is, or advising or coaching, is give people actionable things for them to go and do. And so the thing he asked me to go and do, because I was making money, but I actually hadn't even registered a business yet. He's like, go to your city hall or wherever it is that you got to register and get a business name. So I did. And then take that and go and get yourself a business bank account. And then the third thing was go and call 2 more people who you think could hire you. And so I went and did all those things, and I was done by 1:00 in the afternoon. He called me back the next day, and he was like, you're officially the first person who's ever called me back. And so then he gave me another thing, and it kind of turned into this mentoring type relationship. We wouldn't have called it mentoring. He was just being a wise friend in many ways. So yeah.
Wow, but I think you call it lucky, but I think I do believe in the law of attraction, Todd. I don't know at that point if you were clear on what you wanted or where you wanted to go. I'm a big vision board person. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to get there, right? And so sometimes the world and the universe works the way it's supposed to, is what I'm saying. And a lot of entrepreneurs get those moments, those downloads, those signs, and it happens
Yeah.
consistently the clearer they get and what they want. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious, that it sounds like that kept happening for you.
It did. Well, that one was, it was luck. I was presented with this
Luck. Yeah.
opportunity. I was still presented with this opportunity. And then I did do something with it. Right. And then, so now let's fast forward just a couple of years. This is December 1999. I was about 2 and a bit years in. And here I am. I'm reading as many books as I can so I can get just better with coaching young athletes and understanding the mind and psychology and just the biology of the body and how it moves. And one of the things that I was sort of starting to develop as a unique perspective was I did not take a psychological approach. Typically, it was very much a holistic, like we've got this entire system, this body. And one of the things that I had uncovered was gut health, for example. Like if you've got a yeast infection,
Yeah.
it actually mimics the exact same experience of depression in the mind. So all these people out there who feel like they're got brain fog, or I have a lack of clarity for my business, before I say people, or I tell people, you don't need another goals workshop. You don't need another self-help book. Some people just need to get rid of the yeast infection in their gut, right? Because this is a whole system. And it's one of the things, it's why I kind of rail against the personal development and self-help industry so much, because they take hammers and they treat everyone like with a psychological nail, as if it's, and they actually make a lot of good people feel maybe insecure about themselves, and they shouldn't. There's actually something else that's going on. But anyways, I
Todd,
was
whoever
reading.
solves for that, this is just an entrepreneurial like innovation thing there. Cause I've had autoimmunes, I've had things medically for a long time too. And there's no one who brings all those pieces together yet. And that's like so the fact that you're having these conversations at an earlier time frame is
Yeah,
really important to recognize, because when you're going through things, you're kind of your own advocate. It's not easy to
yeah,
connect all those dots. But I do think that it's a huge opportunity in the wake of what's happening with mindfulness and
yeah,
mental wellness today to really
yeah,
bring all that together, right?
yeah.
So,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's part of the approach that we have right now with my coaching and training companies. Is there is a huge element of individuality in
Mhm.
the very center of how we operate with people, and we do assess that stuff, like what's going on with someone in their family system, inside their own health system, their physical systems and stuff. So anyways, but going back to the mentor thing, so 2 years in, and knew enough to know that I didn't know enough, and I was not getting access to what I thought was good information, reading different psychology books or popular books at the time. But I came across one book that just resonated, and it was a book called Coaching the Mental Game by
Mhm.
Harvey Dorfman, who in the world of baseball is known as the Yoda of baseball. So his book just resonated. It just clicked. It was matter of fact. It was in plain speech. And so I reached out to Harvey because it was the baseball off season. It was around Christmas time. And I left him a voicemail and I said, "Hi, Harvey. I got a small little fledgling peak performance practice, and I've read all these books, and yours is the only one that makes sense. I have no idea if you want to write another book, but I would love to come down and just be an assistant to you and take care of paperwork so that you've got more time to write more things, because I just want to read more of your stuff." And he
Mm.
called me back a couple of days later, and his first words were, "You don't want to come down to live with me, kid, do you?" And I was like, "No, no, no. I've got an aunt and uncle who live in your area." He lived in North Carolina, which was a long way away from where I was in Edmonton, Alberta. And I was like, "No, I've got an aunt and uncle who live probably not too far from you. I can stay with them." And so we did some more back and forth, and he agreed. So I went down and I spent 33 days with Harvey. And I lied. I did not have an aunt and uncle who lived near him. I stayed at a Motel 6 for $28.50 a night. And I maxed out my Scotiabank credit card because I wasn't making, again, I was making about $8.56 an hour. I maxed out my
When
credit
was
card.
it? So what age you said? Where were we in
So
the timeline?
I was 25,
25.
sorry,
Okay.
24 going to 25. Yeah. So I was with Harvey, and it was just a master class, because here I am, I'm working with best mental game coach in the world. And on the 8th day of me being there, Roger Clemens came down from the New York Yankees to have his annual session with Harvey. And Harvey invited me to sit in on that session, and Roger okayed it. And I sat there and I was like, here's the greatest picture of that time, talking to the greatest mental game coach. And everything I thought that pro athlete would be asking him about is not anything. It was almost life coaching. It was a lot more stuff that was happening off the field, managing off the field relationships that were causing stress on the field. And that massively changed my perspective. And then the next day, Andy Pettit came in, and the next day, Craig Biggio, like all the biggest names in baseball, made their annual pilgrimages to come see the Yoda. I mean, that's what they called him. And it was so funny, because there's one time he was in a conversation, I won't say who it was, and they were complaining about their relationship with their wife. And he was like, this was going on for about 3 minutes, this person unpacking it. And Harvey said, "Are you done?" And then and he goes, "Yeah." He's like, "Great. Because I am really sick and fucking tired of hearing you bitch and moan a little," and then I won't insert the next word.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And he was like so rotational in the moment, but I saw how it melted the other person, and they're like, "You're right. I just needed to get it off my chest." And he's, "Yeah, well,
Wow.
you need to give him some kind of coaching around like what he needed to improve with himself." And then that really informed some of my coaching style, because I necessarily don't swear a lot at my clients. I'm not afraid to swear, but I'm not afraid to call them out for really bitchiness type behavior. Like, you're an autonomous person. Like, you're here. Like, you want coaching from
Sure.
me. We're not doing therapy. I do coaching. I don't therapy. I've got a stable of people that I refer people off to, but I coach people. And
So actually, can we stick there for 1 second? Because I'm sure people who are in the space are like, okay, you're kind of going the psychology side. You don't have a diploma, like you don't have anything certifications around that. So what's that balance? What was that like? Because even as somebody who does advisory for
yeah,
entrepreneurs, therapy always ends up being part of it because it's people need to be coached through their barriers, right? It just sort of happens. So I'm curious how you balance
yeah.
that line.
So I stayed in my lane. I do not delve into therapy. Now, the very nature of especially doing mental game work with people, which even has even more so of a frame than advisory or business coaching or whatever. And again, I agree with what you say, that the nature of it is you're going to find some roadblocks within people. And you're going to poke and you're going to find some sensitive areas. But I tell people that, listen, I'm wholly unqualified to do any sort of therapy. I actually know them. Like I know family systems therapy because there's really great tools inside of cognitive behavioral therapy, inside of
Sure.
family systems therapy, inside of transactional analysis and all these things. And I've got them. But I don't do therapy with people because therapy is a lot of very much you're going to be reflecting and trying to change a narrative and story about what that thing is so that someone can be freed from it. I am a performance guy and I am moving you forward. And now when I find, let's say it's you, and there is some pebbles in the shoe that need to get pulled out and I'm not qualified to do it, I have 5 people around the world that I refer people to. And that was an important part of building a stable of other great peers that I could be collaborating with. Because that's my one challenge with coaching nowadays is many people posture that they have the answer to fix every problem that you've got. And it just does people a massive injustice. And I mean, I've got over 19,000 hours of coaching one-on-one, not group, not training, not speaking. That's another 22,000. I'm a pretty tough person to beat on numbers of hours of coaching people at an elite level for a long period of time. And I won't touch that stuff.
Good. That's just a good distinction to have. So, okay, so now you're at this place, you've gotten these incredible experiences watching this master, then what
Yeah.
happened?
So because Harvey always got hired by a sports team, San Diego Padres at the time, he couldn't take individual clients over the year. And so what happened was people would reach out to him and he'd say, listen, I can't work with you, obviously, because of conflict of interest. I work with the Padres, but there's a young guy that I'm working with. And he would say, he's just as good, maybe even better than me. And he kind of needs to do that because the person doesn't want chicken liver over here. They want the filet mignon of him. And so he started funneling clients. And so that was actually the pipeline that started bringing in the pro level clients at a higher degree. I already had one. I had one who was in the NHL, a rookie. But now all of a sudden I was playing at a very, very different level. Secondly, the thing that I learned from being around mentors was, and this is really important for everyone here, don't think that your mentors have everything figured out. The one thing I noticed about Jim and Harvey was I had this entrepreneur, like here I am, I'm a coach and I'm running a practice, but I didn't want to, quote, just be that. I wanted to build a business. And those people were typically not very good at building businesses around themselves, right? Like a system. So one thing that it helped me with was knowing what I didn't want to go and build. I didn't want to be a road warrior like Jim was. I didn't want to be on the road speaking. I loved speaking. I still love speaking. I didn't want to be on the road 5 days a week doing that. And I was kind of doing that at the time. So I learned what I didn't want to be building as a business. So it started me down a pathway of learning about other ways that I could be building up a coaching and training business that had more leverage built into it. And that was one of the best gifts from a mentor, was knowing what not to do or knowing what my preferences were. And really with, I think, a high level of self-awareness, being true to myself and, okay, well, yeah, Harvey does it that way and Jim does it that way, but I don't want to do that.
So something like that moment when you obviously done a lot of coaching even up to that point, but now you're going from one pro athlete to several.
Yeah.
Was there a moment of imposter syndrome? Was there moments of anything there that got you to move from sort of, call it not amateur, but experienced amateur to pro? What happened for you then?
Here's what I'll say is I would have had way more imposter syndrome if I hadn't had those days with. I got such a fast track in how to be a great coach. And I realized that I was doing so many things right at the time, thankfully, just in the call it bedside manner, just like the way that I was dealing with clients and stuff. But yeah, like when those, especially when the first baseball player reached out, because I hadn't worked with baseball players at an elite level yet, then there was definitely some concern and worry. But that's where I really doubled down on my kind of unique selling proposition of, I'm like, listen, I don't touch your skills. I literally just play inside the inner game world. And my only role is to align your thinking with your emotions and with what you've already got as physical skills. So I'm not going to touch your physical skills. I'm going to be working with this other stuff and just turning the little dials in your head to try and crack open that safe of performance. And that was it. So I can't even remember going back and thinking about, it didn't really come up as much. I just didn't overpromise with people. I just didn't overpromise. There's a lot of people who would, and they still do it today. Hey, if you learn this concept, like even me with the alter ego effect, I mean, I've sold hundreds of thousands of these books around the world. And the way that I always frame the alter ego stuff is it's a tool. And the people who win in life, I find, are the ones that have the most valuable tools in their toolkit. And knowing how to change your identity when you're someone who's pursuing lots of big things all the time is just a really great superpower to have. But do you need to have an alter ego to succeed in life? Of course you don't. Of course you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're going to go into that in a second. But one thing I wanted to mention, you talked about the results you were creating with these individuals, or being with Harvey, you realized you were doing a lot of things right. And that's validation, right?
yeah,
And so those are moments, and I'm listening to, you have a lot of the pieces where spaghetti started to become growth. But would you say that was the catalyst for you, that moment when you're like, wow, there's something here? What was that moment for you?
undoubtedly. It was around like day 13 with Harvey where I was like, oh, I got this. I saw so much of myself in Harvey. He was we kind of came from similar maybe backgrounds in some way. And I had all these really stupid rules in my head, Seema, about what I thought I was going to need in order to be an authority in my space. I was going to have to, like, again, you talked about not having a degree. Man, that plagued me. You talked about it. That's where it plagued me, was I was so concerned of being found out on that side of things. But I never said that I was a sports psychologist. I was a mental game guy, and I was just and that was born out of my own practitionership with myself. And then my insecurities about being found out drove me to have just every tool as I could possibly get. I think that that's what people miss out on, is that they think that the imposter syndrome is such a negative thing. And again, I deal with it. I mean, I've got playbooks on how to deal with imposter syndrome all the time, but everyone wants to get rid of it. And I'm like, do you realize how powerful it is and how it drives like just this insatiable desire to always get better? That helped me out so much. But going back, day 13 was when I really saw, I'm like, oh, I got this. I can do this.
All right. So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit, right? So actually one precursor question. So when you were first with those doing your speeches, $2,200 workshops that were free, and you started getting clients to where you are now, how did that pricing change, right? How did that change your model? Talk about that, and then I'm gonna go a little forward.
Well, I stayed poor for a really long time, Seema. I was never
It's
really
just
good
good
early
for
on.
people to hear. This is really good, right?
Yeah,
You gotta.
I was not good with my pricing early on. And again, like the internet changed so much. Like the information that's available now, this was not available to us back then. You had to go to libraries and you had to pick up books and sort through and sift through stuff. But Harvey helped me with my pricing. So that was one thing.
Okay.
He kind of pulled out his table of pricing and he said, just use this. And I was like, but I'm not Harvey Dorfman. And he's like, yeah, you are. You're hard. You just take this.
Amazing.
He's like, you can play with it all you want. So I just simply took Harvey's pricing and used it. And that became, I mean, I gave myself a 10x increase in income price, like for myself. That was right off the bat. And I got to tell you, that's one of the great benefits of having a mentor, because so many young people, or not entrepreneurs, there's 4 P's of business, right? Promotion, pricing. Pricing is one of the 4 major keys of strategy in business. And I was terrible at it at the beginning, but Harvey helped me with that. So I changed my pricing pretty quickly. And then that evolved over time. And now, I'm charging, thousands and thousands of dollars per hour to work with me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. One of the things I talk a lot. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but I have 5 young people that I mentor every year for free. They have to fill out an essay and then I'll mentor them for free, because I never want to stay detached from working with young people. And again, this is I'm not just I'm not quote just a coach. I run businesses. I've got a software company as well, and I write books and things. But I still personally identify as a coach.
Amazing. So you went from sort of a generalist coaching to this inner game. So you got into your specialty, your niche. Now let's talk about what I call in this, in sort of the ladder, is the Sherpa stage. So where did the 90-day year come from? Because now that's your methodology. It's a way
Yeah,
to bring it to scale, right? And so how did you transition from where you were then to sort of the larger
yeah.
business side of scaling it?
It was a baseball. So so there's a couple of tracks that are going on at the same time. So much of my coaching was feel. And I knew that that was wrong. I needed a process because in order for me to get removed from this, I need to build a process for myself. So I was just constantly trying to consume anything around process in training and process in coaching, which again was not really available back then. So a lot of it was sort of inventing as I went, talking to mentors about it. Some of them saying, you don't need a process. So sometimes they weren't very helpful. So I've got this mission that I'm on in my head. I've got to crack this business nut of process. And then I was working with a baseball client and we started mapping his performance. And over the years, you could see it always dipped in the middle. And that's because the baseball season is a really long season. So I just said to him, hey, why don't we just break up this 180-day season into two 90-day things? It's literally where it came from. And back then I called them 90-day sprints because sprint is a business or a sports term. And boom, that got him results. And the whole idea behind it was, what is the one skill that if we worked on it in the next 90 days is going to create the most inordinate amount of performance change in you? And so then we'd have to really look at the game itself and we'd get them to evaluate their strengths and weaknesses. So here I am going back to that first track. I need a process. And I'm literally, because of my focus and my intention on solving that problem in the real world, going back to your whole law of attraction thing, I was being given experiences to help fill in that slot over here. And so that's where 90-day year sprint came from. Once I started working more in the business world in about 2003, that's when I started. It was actually an executive at Chevron that changed it to 90-day year because he was like, hey, sprints, that's not really a term that we use. Again, Scrum was barely even a thing at that time, but we have calendars. So what do you call it? 90-day year. And I was like, oh, brilliant. I love it. So yeah, that became and I kept on iterating on that. And that became my process and system that I've taken into corporate world, small business world. That was the thing that drove athletes' growth, was the system of how we just create results that are remarkable while keeping you in flow state and peak state, because that's the key.
While keeping you in flow state and peace state. But what you just did was create an opportunity for your business to be scalable and
Yeah.
really bring consistent results to the people you serve. And
Yeah.
so to me, there's such a critical teachable moment here, especially when you're an expert. You could be selling features all day long. You need to focus on selling transformation. And when you have years of experience behind your belt, I'm not talking about the 1 year of this and now I'm creating the system. You clearly
Yeah.
have thousands of hours of experience that have created consistent results. Taking this intelligence and packaging it is such an opportunity for entrepreneurs to scale, right? And
Yeah.
it's a lot of what I teach in the unique method. So you're validating a lot for me too, which is exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was doing a talk. It was around this time last year, actually, I think it was. And everyone that was on there, about 4,000 coaches, I think, on it. And I said to everyone, our machinery that makes our product is literally these calls, like these coaching calls, these speaking calls. So I said, I don't know about you guys, but and I've done this for 20 years. I spend at least 4 hours a week rewatching my coaching calls and my speeches, because that's the game film of my business. That's like me on the field of play. And I'll analyze. I'm like, in that conversation, I should have been a little bit more patient, or I should have asked that the right question should have been this one, or it is, again, finding the right things that you did. I'm like, oh, that was a good question. Where did that one come from? Because I haven't asked that one before, but look at the meat that it gave me. Or sometimes maybe you'll miss the visceral physical reaction that someone had in that moment, where you could see some of their stress and anxiety melt away off of them. And so then my responsibility, I think, is to then make sure that you know that. And I'll ping you with a text message later and say, hey, Seema, I was just rewatching our call from Wednesday. And I just wanted to let you know that and tell me if I'm wrong or right on this, but when we were talking about X, it really looked like it sunk in for you. And that's the stuff that really creates tremendous bond and reaction, because that's not something that people typically get in a coaching relationship, is someone following up 2 days later to reinforce the learning. And so anyways, I shared that on this call and people were like, wait, you rewatch your calls? And I was like, yeah, again, I want to be a pro at this. Okay. And when I say I want to be a pro, some people could say you are a pro, but I take the approach of I'm always becoming more of that. And this is what pros do. Pros look at game film. Pros do a postmortem on something. Amateurs
Yeah.
don't. They just keep on moving forward and they lose all of this value that they could be creating feedback loops for themselves a lot more rapidly.
Well, I mean, that if that's not gold, I don't know what else is, because you're working so hard always in your business that stepping back, actually reviewing, giving more value to your client. That was a lot in that. And then obviously you're getting better and better through the process yourself. So that
Yeah.
was an incredible share. Let me ask you, what is one of the most proudest moments you've had in the world that you're in?
One of the most proudest moments. So when I had a fairly strong ego when I was in high school. I was going to be this first Canadian kid to go win the Heisman Trophy in America. And in my yearbook, it said, you'll see me on NFL Films one day. So NFL Films is the legend of narrative-based documentaries. They actually wrote the book on it, and they did all these amazing gridiron type documentaries on football players. And so my idea was they're going to do a story on Todd Herman and his NFL career. And
Okay.
obviously that never happened. I never went off to play in the NFL. But 3 years ago, right before Kobe passed away, and I worked with Kobe on the Black Mamba and created the Black Mamba with Kobe, he shared an Instagram story talking about my book and how this is the exact process that was created, the Black Mamba was created from, and go read the book and follow Todd and blah, blah, blah. And that caught the attention of NFL Films. And so they reached out and they ended up doing a 10-minute documentary on me, my work in pro sports and building alter egos with football players in the book and all this kind of stuff. And so it was such a full circle moment, because what I thought was the way that I was going to go and be on NFL Films wasn't the way that I ended up getting on there.
Yeah.
But to your whole law of attraction thing, at some point in time, it came to be. But then when I look at, well, what was the process there that helped get me there? Well, you get on NFL Films as a player because you've had a professional career, right? And so I just look and go, well, I guess I approached my career in a professional way, and it's got me to that place where I was able. So that was for me, it was a very, now that's an egotistical one you could say, but for me, that was a very proud moment, because I still look at myself as a farm kid from nowhere, Alberta, and I got to realize a really important dream for me.
I don't know if you watched the Grammys the other night, but Beyonce won the ultimate amount of Grammys, and
Yeah.
she's the GOAT, right? In a lot of ways, and you're the GOAT for doing what you do. But she just said it. I'm going to receive this,
Yeah.
and I think it's important with the work and the consistency and the resilience and everything that goes into building a business. And really, you're in it for impact, and of course, you're making money doing what you're doing, but you're allowed to receive, Todd. That's not ego.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
like that's something that you manifested, and it came full circle. But the only reason it came full circle was the amount of impact that you've been able to make on people throughout your career. So kudos to
Sure.
you on that. Yeah. Yeah. A couple other things. So let's go into the alter ego effect. Let's go into the book, right? So 90-day year is, for those of you who don't know, you do major workshops throughout the country. I mean, you've done all these incredible things with entrepreneurs and their scales. Maybe you want to talk about that for a second, but let's go into how the alter ego effect came to be and sort of where it is.
Yeah. Well, this only kind of does a job of highlighting what I was just saying before about looking at game film. So when I played high school football, I created an alter ego for myself to go out and compete. And that was, a lot of people create this alternate identity to step into when they're deeply insecure about something that they really care about pursuing. You just talked about Beyonce, right?
Yeah.
The
Sasha
origin
Fierce.
story of Sasha Fierce was because she was a gospel singing young girl in Houston, Texas, singing these religious hymns in very modest attire at the front of the church. And now her dad has her in a girl band with 7 other girls, including her sister. And
Yeah.
now they're singing provocative lyrics and dancing provocatively on these local stages around Houston and Texas. And that made her feel really awkward. And it was not easy for her to go and do that. She felt like there was something wrong in it, but she really wanted to go and do it. So she created Sasha Fierce to help her step into the creative side of herself and disassociate from this other identity that she had. And so I did the same thing in football, and allowed me to, despite my lack of size when I was playing, play at a way higher level. And then when I started working with athletes, my more premier or better athletes they would talk to me about a persona that they had when they went on the ice or the court or the field, a secret identity that they had, or an alter ego. They'd just use all the character. They'd use all these different words. And I would just simply say, oh my God, I did the same thing. Cool. What's yours like? And then I was preparing this one athlete who was on the US Olympic swim team for the 2004 Olympics in Athens. And this is in 2003. And she mentioned her alter ego. And it was just like a domino just went down in my head. And I was like, wait a second. Her, this person, this person, this person, this person, and all these people. This is a thing. Like, this is an actual performance tool that these best of the best are using. So I started going back to past clients and interviewing them and asking, like, what was your process? Maybe they were done playing, and what was your process? What did that look like? How'd you get into it?
Yeah.
How was it inspired by? Why did you do it? And so I built out this method. Originally it had about 7 steps, then it went down to 4, and then it settled into kind of like the 5 that it is now. And I built out the alter ego method. Originally I called it character crafting, actually. And that's what I became known for globally then, was Todd's the guy that builds out the alter egos or performance identities for athletes. And so I know you talk about that unique mechanism or whatever. And sometimes the thing that blows you up isn't a large promise. It's actually an extraordinarily narrow promise. And so people, they mention alter egos on Twitter, and I get tagged immediately. Like, oh, have you read Todd's book? So that name, I'm a category. I own that category now. And so that's kind of where that originally came from, is just paying attention, being aware. And I just tracked things. And just one day, I was probably missing it longer than I should have, frankly. And then I started building, and I really anchored on it. And then that's how I became known as really a quick hit guy. Because now when I was working with your identity, I could shift you a lot faster, because your habits, your attitudes, your beliefs are all stacked upon whatever you associate yourself with. And if I can get you to associate with a stronger identity, all bets are off. I don't need to work with you on behaviors and habits and attitudes. That one mechanism changes so many other things because of it.
Wow. So let me ask you, I could talk to you forever, but like, what's the advice you would give an entrepreneur who's at that spaghetti stage right now, who is working hard, trying to figure it out, but really focused on trying to get to growth? What would you ask? What would you tell them?
I would say, 1, really do a good analysis on where your strengths are, where you've probably put a bunch of your assets, your skills, the things that you've earned over your life, and you've sort of swept them underneath the rug in pursuit of someone else's rug and way that they're building out things. And so I'd say, just, hey, take a look at yourself. Where are your strengths? I'm a massive extrovert. I will win every day on my treadmill having conversations like this. It doesn't drain 1 ounce of energy in me. So 1, become more self-aware about what your strengths are. And then how can you apply those strengths to the way that you're growing your business? So I did my speaking. I applied. That was my way. That was my method. If you're someone who already has great relationships in a certain sector of your industry, start there. I just want to give people a bit of a word change. People use the word your target market. And I find that traps many people. I call it your starter market. I started out with hockey players. I was not really a hockey player. I was in Canada. That was where I had contacts. I knew influential people in hockey. So that's where I started. Plus, that's who has money in Canada. There's so much money in hockey. So it was a good choice. But I ended up growing into working with 82 different sports teams. So become aware of that. And then second is really, really, really tighten up that focal on who it is that you're trying to go and win with first, because it can always expand out. But when you're trying to expand big, it's really hard to get traction with that. So change your focus, narrow it, understand yourself better, and then how can you apply that to that narrow focus? And then with the spaghetti that's on the wall, just like I was reviewing and still review my hours of coaching every single week, take a look at, and there might be some strings there that you can pull on that are actually attached to a big fat meatball that's going to satiate your business for a long time.
Yeah. And if you're vegetarian, maybe it's something else like a veggie meat. I don't know. I'm vegetarian, so I had to throw that in there.
Yeah. It's a Beyond Meat meatball. So,
It's the beyond. There you go. Oh, okay. Last two questions. One, how can people help you? We're all entrepreneurs. We all have things that we need for growing our impact in our businesses. How can people help you?
well, I mean, from podcasts, my favorite thing is when someone shares a favorite takeaway from this, whether tag me on Twitter, because I will find it and I will interact with you, or a screenshot and take it on Instagram or just whatever your favorite takeaway is. Because I love, again, it's game film. It's just, oh, that's the thing that resonated with you. That's helpful for me because, I love the types of people that you work with. There are a lot of very similar people that we work with in our 90-day year world as well. So that's an easy share. And if you do go and pick up the book, tag me in that. Let me know what you're getting, what you're confused by, or anything, so that I can help.
And then how can people find you, Todd?
ToddHerman.me is my home base on the interwebs. And then Todd_Herman is typically the profile that I have on most of my social media sites. So they can get all the links to my world from ToddHerman.me though.
Yeah, there are a lot of great resources, free ones that you also mentioned. Listen, thank you so much for being on the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. This was such an honor. I mean, there was so much that you shared truly transparently with us. And I think for all the entrepreneurs listening, like, this world of entrepreneurship is a journey, but taking all those pieces from who you actually are, where you play your strengths, how you do it uniquely and differently than others, bringing that together and owning that,
Yeah.
being in your form, in your peak performance, that's how you're going to win. And you shared so much of that, Todd, today. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to the next time.
Cheers. Thanks, Seema.
Thank you.
Hello, S2G Tribe, aka Growth Tribe. As an entrepreneur, I know time is currency, and I don't take it lightly that you listened into today's episode of the From Spaghetti to Growth podcast. I hope it added value, and I'm truly honored to be part of your entrepreneurial journey. Be sure to head to disruptive.ceo and the soon-to-becoming SeemaAlexander.com to grab today's show notes and free resources to uncover opportunities to turn your unique spaghetti into growth. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, comment, and subscribe on your podcast platform, and keep listening. Look forward to seeing you on our next episode.